Snake Eye Fiend Smith. If you don't know this deck already, get ready to hate it, and if you already knew it, you're gonna hate it even more. The general consensus among pretty much every single high-level player out there is that the Snake Eye Fiend Smith deck will be the best deck by a long shot, and if there has to be a second best deck, it would be Yubel Fiend Smith because they both utilize the Fiend Smith engine, which is absolutely correct. And of course, they both play a lot of hand traps, which is fun for everyone. And unfortunately, this is kind of what Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been reduced to. You just pick the decks that have the best one-card combos and can play the most amount of hand traps, and you're good to go. Thing is, ever since Snake Eye came out in Phantom Nightmare, it was kind of obvious that it would be the best deck. Especially considering the fact that we can look at the OCG to base ourselves off of their results. And even though you'd love to believe that their format is currently diverse, it's really not. Fiend Smith decks are dominating there. And if it's not Fiend Smith, it's Tenpai Dragon, which also plays like 20 hand traps, which is hardly any better. Don't let the pie charts distract you from reality because there's pretty much no diversity regardless of the region you're in. Some players were hoping that maybe we'd get a Banlist by mid-July. I mean, it might have been coherent because Banlists have a tendency to happen every like 3.5 months to 4 months. But instead of that, Konami announced that the Banlist would happen late August, which means that whether you like it or not, both the North American and European WCQs will be infested by Fiend Smith decks. And I don't know if you've been living under a rock, but bro, every single Fiend Smith card is like a secret rare. So yeah, enjoy spending over like $300 on a playset of the Fiend Smith monster and like another 100 to 150 on the Tractus and everything else that you need. Before your tournament even started, your bank is already crying. But don't worry, because you will also be crying once the event starts. Reason is pretty simple. You'll be facing off against a lot of Snake Eye Fiend Smith and they will ruin your life. Oh, you drew 2 hand traps against them going second. Not bad. That's great. Congratulations on the hand looping yourself for 2 because they can still make like 5 interruptions through that. Wait, you're telling me that you're playing board breakers instead of hand traps? Brother, do us both a favor and just sign the match slip right now. There is no reason to play it out. No, yeah, because that's exactly what this format is at the current moment. It's just a hand trap shit show. You can expect some deck lists to run anywhere between 15 to 20 hand traps now, which is insanity. I mean, bruv, you can't have fun when you're not allowed to play, right? And you also can't have fun when you're going second and your hand traps do nothing against them. Like, it's the worst of both worlds. You gotta play hand traps, but at the same time, hand traps are garbage. And this is why I have so much empathy for the newer or casual players out there. Honestly, I think the meta decks have been a little too overpowered as of lately. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like this game has literally the worst approach to fixing power creep I've ever seen. A new tier 0 deck exists? Yeah, that's fine, no problem. Just create another unfair tier 0 deck that's designed to beat it. I mean, that's kinda how tier elements got dethroned by Kashtira. Either that or just keep printing hand traps until we eventually start playing 25 hand traps. Oh, you're laughing, but eventually we'll all be playing a hand trap deck featuring some miscellaneous splashable engine. My issue with hand traps is that as long as they exist, they drastically narrow down the possible decks that are allowed to be competitive. Your deck just folds to 1 Ash, 1 Veiler, or 1 Imperm? Too bad for you, gotta think of something else now. Because of the fact that so many hand traps exist, Konami is kind of forced to print new decks that just consistently beat them. Otherwise, they become obsolete and dead content. Like, nobody would have played Tenpai Dragon if they didn't have the field spell that made all their monsters unaffected by card effects during the main phase. Nobody would have played Snake Eye if it didn't have Appaloosa, Divine Temple, or Flamberge to negate or recover from Nibiru. And nobody would play the Yubel deck if they didn't have Phantom of Yubel to negate a hand traps or the Fiend Smith engine to pop off. I mean, I can keep going. There's a very good reason why these decks have the power level that they currently have. They need to be good so that they can be played, and they need to be the main star so Konami can push their product. They've been pushing the Fire Attribute for like a full year now, and they've also been pushing the Fiend type for quite a while. I mean, look at Yubel. It all started with the Unchained deck, which got insane support this year. And Tenpai had to be pushed to allow players to choose a going second deck if they wanted to, instead of always relying on winning the dice roll. I can't necessarily say that I'm a huge fan of the turn of events that led us to where we are now, but I can definitely understand it. It makes sense from a business perspective to allow whatever deck they print to exist for at least one format. Especially if like YCS attendance is not going down regardless of if people are saying they're quitting or not. And when we really think about it, banning the Snake Eye deck before this WCQ season would have changed absolutely nothing. It wouldn't have made it any less of a tier 0 format, and I want to say, if anything, it just would have made Yubel Fiend Smith the best deck by a long shot. The fact that there are now 2 Fiend Smith based decks in the same category, in a way, kind of demonstrates that this was Konami's intention from the very start. Either that, or things just conveniently ended up this way. But honestly, I doubt it, well, at least for the TCG. Because when Konami prints stupid cards for the OCG, at least you can say, oh, well, that's the experimental phase, it might be a mistake or something. But in the TCG, there is no surprise factor because we already know what deck is about to be broken because, again, we have reports from the OCG. So what I'm saying is, coincidences might happen in the OCG, but definitely not in the TCG. Konami knows exactly what they're doing. Anyways, what do I think of all this, and do I hate the Snake Eye and Yubel decks that much? So personally, what I really dislike about them is how extremely restrictive they are in how you can play them. The Fiend Smith engine, for example, went from being a fair, in a way, splashable engine to being completely unfair because of Moon of the Closed Sky. So now you can turn any 3 monsters into the Fiend Smith combo, which obviously opens up the door to Beatrice, which is extremely degenerate, and it kind of allows you to turbo out pretty much anything you want. You can Gimmick Puppet lock your opponent, you can turbo out any Floodgate, you can get any kind of engine started, it just does whatever you want. But now we just got a new TCG exclusive by the name of Necro Quip Princess that makes it so that instead of relying on having 3 bodies to go into your Fiend Smith combo, you only really need 2. Yeah, that's completely ridiculous. Because that means that you can combo with even less cards and also gives you more wiggle room when you happen to get handshopped. This means that decks are now more resilient than ever, more powerful than ever, because the Fiend Smith engine is extremely oppressive and does a lot on its own. And again, since the Fiend Smith engine can get your Snake Eye or Yubel engine started, it also means that decks are now more consistent than ever. So yeah, in other words, you gotta win the lottery to win going second against either Snake Eye or Yubel. Skill isn't enough. It's a necessity, sure, but it's not enough. I don't care how talented you are at the game. If you only drew one hand shot and your opponent had the extender to push through it and make the full board, you lose. This is due to the fact that just like decks are super good going first, they're also not really good going second, even in a mirror match. I mean, that's more or less true because the Snake Eye deck is really good going second, but again, against like 5 interruptions, it might be a little tricky. Well, at least just with your engine, unless you draw the absolute stones, but at this point, bruh, what can I say? If your goal is to draw the nuts every single game during 16 rounds at a WCQ, best of luck, my man. Realistically though, your deck will brick from time to time, regardless of how you build it, by the way, and it'll sporadically screw you over, which is beautiful, of course. Sometimes your deck plays through 3 handshots and sometimes it plays through 0. And again, every single deck list I feel like will be completely identical because everybody has to play the exact same handshots. So yeah, you can definitely break on too many handshots, which is one of the circumstances of deck building in the actual format. I've already stated in the past how I hated handshots being a necessity for Yu-Gi-Oh! I think handshots are fine for Yu-Gi-Oh! If they're a choice, so you do not get heavily punished for not playing them, but you also do not get heavily rewarded for playing them. But as it currently stands, handshots are honestly like the only truly effective way to deal with the boards that are being set up. Now, I've crapped on this format quite a lot, but there are still some positive things I can say about it. This format clearly rewards players for deck building above and beyond to get the most advantage they can get. For example, simply building an extra deck in the Snake Eye deck already deserves a standing ovation. Bro, the extra deck space is so tight that you know you've cooked when you can justify each and every single one of your slots. It's a format that forces you to improve at the game because we know what to expect, which means that you can get rewarded for doing your homework. That means studying the tier 0 decks and building a somewhat consistent strategy to beat them. It also means that you gotta create a side deck that could fix all your worst nightmares. There are countless constraints that you have to be aware of when prepping for an event like the NA or European WCQ. And as a matter of fact, I like to compare these events to like the final exams in school because it is the most important exam of the year. And if you ace this test, you're going to Worlds, which is pretty good. You know, not too bad, I'll take it. And also, think about it. If everyone else is demotivated, but not you, you get rewarded for having more willpower than everyone else. So, in conclusion, this format is super sacky, super boring, and super predictable. It's also pay to win and extremely complex, but it's also skill-based when it comes to deck building, at least, and requires insane prep time to fully understand the metagame. Anyways, I want to hear your thoughts about this format in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.